Good evening. Guten Moed. Joe Vogel. Chag Sameach. Long time no see. Give us a minute here to just let a few more people come on. How are you? Where are you? Okay, 30 seconds will begin. Just let a few more people join. Excuse me. Okay, tonight's class is on the secrets of the Sukka. Now, when we say secrets, it doesn't mean that you may not know about them. Maybe you do. They're called secrets because we're talking about the Sod. You know that the Torah is interpreted in 4 levels. Pshat, Drosh, Remez, and Sod. Pshat, the simple meaning, and Sod are the Kabbalistic interpretations. And we, in our class here, of course, are learning those interpretations through the medium of Chassidus, and particularly Chabad Chassidus. But before we start, let's say a couple things that we want to do by way of introduction. First of all, these classes in general are dedicated to the elevation of the soul of our good friend and mutual friend of many out there, Shlomi Bundi, Shlomi ben Moshe. And also tonight, this learning is dedicated to Refuah Shleimus of Hana Edel Bas Miriam, Shner Zalman Yehuda ben Hinda Yecheved, Yitzchak ben Devorah, and Yosef ben Esther. So, Sukkot, Zman Simchosenu. It's called the time of our joy. Why is it the time of joy? What's particularly associated with, well, joy comes when there's something building up inside of you that bursts forth, that can't be contained anymore. And tonight we're going to learn about what it is that's been building inside of us really since the beginning of Tishrei. And really you can go before that to Elul when the king was in the field. It's been a long process of revelation through Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and we're going to see tonight how particularly the Yomim Noroyim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, are related to Sukkot, and particularly how all this is related to the Sukkah. It's interesting that though we make the brucha on the Daled Minim, that's the main brucha that everybody is preoccupied with, because there are so many things to do with the lulav and the esrog, etc., etc. But we say the bracha leishe basukah, leishe basukah. So the sukkah and the holiday, of course, gets its name from that. So before we go to the sukkah, let's just say a few things in general about the Daled Minim. This is a little bit of a recapitulation of where we were last week. The 4 minim. The motion of the 4 minim, as we all know, is to take the lulav with the other 3 minim and bring it to the chest. And the metaphor that represents is bringing revelations of godliness, holiness, righteousness from the highest levels to heart, as we would say in English, to take it to heart. And each one and what is the it that we're taking to heart? The it is achdus, unity. How so? Because each of the Daled Minim, of the 4 minim, represent a different kind of unity. The unity of the aravos, the willow, is a unity that's expressed by the fact that they grow in clumps, like a brotherhood, a number of separate people who've come together for a common cause. That's certainly one level of unity. A bit higher level of unity are the Adasim. The Adasim have to be three, but all coming from a singular point. So this expresses the notion of diversity that's rooted in unity. And the ultimate expression of that, of course, is Av Echad Lekulonu, that all of us human beings, though we are all diverse and unique, all have a common Father. That's the common point of the three leaves of the Adas. Then we have the lulav itself. The lulav itself, when you go hunting for a lulav, you always want to look for a lulav where the leaves are bound together tightly. So on the one hand, we know that it's composed of many things that can separate out when the lulav gets dry, but we want it to express the singularity. So in the lulav, the diversity is more concealed and the unity is more revealed. And that leads us to the esrog. How does the esrog show unity? Well, Chazal tell us that the esrog is a very uncommon fruit. Unlike any other fruit in the world, it's able to withstand both the heat and the cold. Not only withstand, but to be nurtured from the heat and the cold. Opposites are not opposite to the esrog. In other words, for most plants, warmth is good and heat and cold is not. For the esrog, everything is the same. Everything contributes to growth. And that's the notion of the essence of God itself, where right and left have no place, where opposites don't exist, and everything is in a state of singularity. So these are the Daled Minim. The Sukka, which is the name of the holiday, also shows unity in a number of ways. Now, we'll get into our mimer particularly, but the one or two things that are not in the mimer. The minimum number of walls of a sukkah is 3. And in Chassidus, it's explained, it's like the arm. 1 wall, 2 walls, and the third wall doesn't have to be very big at all. And this is like a hug. It says, in Pasuk, it says, Yemini techabkeni, God's right hand embraces me. So God hugs us. But in addition to that, and where we want to go tonight, God encapsulates us in this edifice called a sukkah, of which there is no kosher sukkah, even if you have 3 walls, without the skach. So tonight we're going to focus mainly on the skach. Okay, we'll begin. This is the mimer from the Rebbe Tafshin Lamed Vav. I published the text in Chassidus at K. If you have it, please look at it. If not, just give a listen. And please let me know along the way if you have questions or comments that are germane to what we're talking about. So we'll begin and follow the brackets that I put out in the mimer. Posuk, B'sukkos teishvu shivas yomim, in Sukkos ye shall dwell 7 days. U'moisif oitzivoi, and there is an additional commandment which says, Kol ha'ezer b'Yisrael, any citizen amongst the Jewish people, yoshvu b'sukkos, should dwell in Sukkos. V'hatam al zeh, and the reason for this, the pasuk goes on, Leman yoidu dereseichem, in order that the generations should know, Ki b'sukkos heshvisi es b'nei Yisrael, in Sukkos I caused the children of Israel to dwell, Beitzoisi oisem eretz Mitzrayim, when they went out of Egypt. Now the sukkahs that are being referred to in going out of Egypt are primarily the sukkah of the Ananei HaKavod, the cloud of glory or the cloud of faith, which encompassed the Jewish people as they progressed from Mitzrayim to the Holy Land. Remember, the desert was a place of scorpions and snakes. There were lots of dangers in the desert. And the cloud of glory encompassed the whole of the Jewish camp and protected them from any of the dangers in the desert. So the first thing we want to know about the skach, or should know about the skach, but when we sit in the skach, there's a certain protection. Now, all of the things that we're going to talk about, the sukkah and the skach, are going to culminate in joy. Because one of the first things that I think it's kind of just obvious, that for a person to be happy, there has to be some sense of security, some sense of restfulness. And this was the sense of security that Hashem built around us in the desert. And the sukkah that we're in, and when we go in there, we're meant to have a meditation in the security and the safety and the all-encompassing protection of God that exists when we're in this little booth. The other thing that we know about the sukkah is that it has to be a dira orai. It has to be a not temporary dwelling. So another meditation we have in the sukkah is that this life, this world, is not permanent. Yet, at every moment that we exist in it, God's protection, His energies are encompassing us. So these are a couple of simple meditations that are worth holding as we go through this and exercising tomorrow when we go back into the sukkah. So the sukkah itself is, for us in these generations and all generations, to know of God's encompassing, transcendent, all enveloping presence that's with us all the time and is embodied in the sukkah. V'yadua hadiyukim, third line down if you're following. V'yadua hadiyukim b'zeh, it's known the particular points about this, b'maimer Rabbeinu Nesienu, amongst the words of our Chassidus Rebbeim. Ubeheptim, and first we're going to talk at first about the expression of the Bal HaHiyula. This Maimer was said on Yud Gimel Tishrei, which is the yahrzeit of the Rabbi Maharash. And the Rabbi Maharash pointed out that the sukkah is the inyan of shalom. It's the inyan of peace. And it's based on a pasuk. The pasuk says, it's basically on a mimer that we say in the davening, God should spread over us His sukkah of peace. So again, the sukkah is a place of peace and restfulness. But Tzorech Lahav in the Arabic asked the question, "My hashaychus the sukkah l'sholem." Exactly how does this work? That the sukkah is something that's particularly relevant to peace. And now we go down, if you're following, to my next bracket on this page. With Tzorech Lahav, we have to understand, my hashaychus inyanim ela. What's the relation of all these things? Natilas Dalet Minim, the taking of the 4 species, the Hakreves Ayin Porim, and the fact that on Sukkot something unique happened. All year long we offered korbanos. We brought close offerings to the Mizbeach. And on Sukkot there was a special offering of 70 cows, which were for the 70 nations. In that time in the world, there are 70 languages and 70 nations, and of course 7 times 10, which is the 7 spheros of Chesed to Malchus, as they interconnect and inter-include each other, 7 times 10. So all the nations of the world are included in the Great Sukkah. This is not simply a Jewish thing, it's a Jewish commandment, obviously, but part of the expression of this Jewish commandment is to offer the 70 cows for the sake of the security, safety of the 70 nations, all the nations of the earth. So it's an all-encompassing experience for the earth, for the planet, which is commanded to the Jews to bring down and bring forth. So we now turn to the next page. Any comments so far? Any questions? Fine. Now we're going to get to the point of exploring all of what we've just said in large. In large, we've talked about the Sukka as a place of shalom, a place of peace, and we want to know how that exactly works. We've talked about the Daled Minim, the four Minim, that all express unity, and how a situation or an experience of unity and peace brings forth joy, which is the characteristic of the holiday, and why it's called Zman Simchasenu. The point that we want to of explanation all of these things, the Sukkah inyan hamakif. The Sukkah, its inyan is makif. Makif, the word makif means all-encompassing. And that's the Sukkah, right? It's maybe the only mitzvah that you live inside. Other mitzvahs you take, you do. This one, you live inside. It encompasses you from head to toe. And that's the inyan of the Sukkah, an all-encompassing embrace that generates, is meant to generate, if we will meditate upon it, the sense of God's unity amongst all the beautiful diversity, and the sense of a protection and security that comes with peace. So the inyan of Sukkah is this all-encompassingness, hamakif. And he says this all-encompassingness is v'leika hamaki de lavush. It's not like the all-encompassingness of a garment that you wear. A garment that you wear also encompasses you. Shimi yesa b'chinas makif. When it comes to garments, even though they cover you, encompass you, the kolmokim yesh by his halkus, there are different kinds of garments. Lavushi haresh, there's garments for the head. We call them a hat. It encompasses the head. Lavushi haguf, shirts, pants, skirts, etc. Lavushi haregel, and shoes. So we have all these kinds of separate, different kinds of coverings, each for the sake of protection, the sun from the shade, etc., for modesty as well, and for comfort. And each and every garment has its own characteristics. The all-encompassingness of the Sukkah, there's no division. It's not parts. When you're in a Sukkah, it encompasses your head and your entirety and everything about you. And the Rebbe tells us, what's the intention of this? What are we meant to take from this? We're meant to take from this, just like the head and everything else. Everything is part of one body. Each and every one is part of our one body. So the body of a Jew, not just the parts of the body, but the body of a Jew are encompassed and held together and embraced by this all-encompassing unity. And when people in a community have come together and each one makes their sukkahs, so each one of us is embodied, each one of us and all of our loved ones and friends who are in the sukkah with us are embodied with this singular embodiment of the skach over the sukkah. My next bracket, ubir kazeh. Now to explain this at some depth, as we said above, the sukkah hu inyan makif is an all-encompassing thing. Now we're going to understand now something I mentioned at the beginning. We said that the sukkah, of course, and Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, this holiday is all embraced in the words Zman Simchasenu, the time of our joy. And it's a hemshech, it's a drawing, a continual path from Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur to Sukkot. So in Yom Kippur, in Rosh Hashanah, it says, B'chesed l'yem chaginu, that all of what we're talking about now, this all-encompassing energy that protects and which creates unity, and ultimately of which the outcome is joy. When people come together in community, it brings out tremendous, as we see now, unfortunately in this state we're in, isolation has taken its toll. And community is the opposite. One of the wonderful things about coming together. Besimchas, it's brought often in Chassidus that even a person who's tight-fisted by nature, and doesn't speak out a lot, when he's at the wedding of one of his children, he's generous and he's outgoing. Why is that? Because there's something in community, and there's something in sharing something together that brings out tremendous joy. And this is exactly what we're doing here. We're sharing something in an open way that had been concealed on Rosh Hashanah. Where do we see the concealment? It says about Rosh Hashanah, Bechesel Yom Chagenu. It's the only holiday we have that's on the first of the month, not on the full moon, not the 15th of the month. So the moon itself is concealed. Of course, the Jewish people are compared to the moon, and there's a certain concealment of something on Rosh Hashanah. Now, what that thing is which is concealed is explained in other Maimorim, are called the 13 attributes of God's mercy. Yud Gimel Midas or Rachamim. The whole time of Tishrei is a time of mercy. And in Rosh Hashanah, it's Bechesed. It's concealed. The Kol and Yonim Shehem Bechesed, all the things which are concealed. Kisui Vehelam, covered over. V'hayomim shel lifnei Yom Hagenu, which in the days before our festival, which is this Chag, Misgalim hem b'Sukkos. They're all revealed on Sukkos. So although he's not naming it in this mimer, it's named in other mimers. These are the Yud Gimel attributes of mercy. And we'll go back to Rosh Hashanah, and then we'll go to Yom Kippur, and then we'll see how this empties out, spills out, and comes into us in an open way on Sukkos. So first, back to Rosh Hashanah. So how do we see this idea of something in store for us that's going to come out on Sukkos? Well, let's look at the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. Shemitzvah sayim ha-shofar, b'shofar, right? It tells us that the mitzvah of the day is the blowing of the shofar. Hu bo begilui Yom Chagenu, and what's in the shofar comes out in a revealed way on Yom Chagenu, which is the time of Sukkos. Behaskach the Sukka, in the skach of the Sukka. We'll see how that works out in a little bit. The zemash is skach. When we look at skach and we see about the skach, the kol Sukkos hakosov skach mashma, the doifen lai ikre sukkah. That the whole idea of Sukkos, if you look at the word sukkah, it's basically the word skach, right? Sukkos and skach, the same letters there. And also, what we just said in this bracket is that when you look at a sukkah, even if you had your minimum prerequisite walls, 3 larger walls and 1 little one, you don't have a sukkah. Because the walls of the sukkah don't make the sukkah. What makes the sukkah is the skach. And skach, if you take each letter, samach, kof, and langachof, is gematria 100. And this, so what's the deal with 100? 100 is keneged mea koilos the shofar. There are 100 voices of the shofar that we blow on Rosh Hashanah. So we see in the shofar is a secret. It's alluding to, in a way that we wouldn't have known had we not learned this just now, that in the shofar is hidden the skach, because the 100 voices of the shofar correspond to the gematria of the word skach. Shenego Yisroel, this is the custom, we blow 100 voices. Sheminho Yisroel Toirahu, and it's our custom, and we have an expression that the custom of the Jews becomes Torah, and we are accustomed to blow the Slitkei but Rosh Hashanah, to blow it in Rosh Hashanah. Now also, one more thing about the shofar. Pirte HaKoiles, the separate specific voices of the shofar, Rumozim be'oisius the skach, are hinted at actually in the word skach. How is that? The samech of the word skach is the 60 koilos of the tekiah. There are 60 tekiah, right? 3 voice, tekiah, teruah, v'shvorim. Now the chof of the word skach is hinted at in the 20 voices of the shvorim, and the last one, the 20 voices of the teruah. So, what's the point? there's something hidden in Rosh Hashanah that's going to come out in the skach. And we just showed that it's hidden in the shofar and it's revealed in the word skach. Now, something else. And we're moving now to Yom Kippur. Remember, the commandment that we said about the Sukka is Laman Yoidu, that all the nations will remember that in Sukkahs we dwelled when we went out of Egypt. That was the first Ananei HaKoved, the clouds of glory. Now in the desert, we built a Mishkan. And in that Mishkan was the service of the Kahanim. And one of the services, the most important of which, well, there were two, the Korbanos and the Ketairos, the incense, the smoke of the incense. So it says about the smoke of the incense of Yom Kippur, Shabo Yegilu Yom Chagenu, this smoke of the incense comes out in Revelation in Sukkot. How is this? Kidu as is known. Sheskach HaSukkah, the skach of our Sukkah, Hu Nasim Onin HaKetoros, the Yom Kippurim, is made of the cloud of incense of Yom Kippur. Now, he doesn't mean this physically. He means that spiritually, what's going on here is that, remember, the Ketores were offered by the Kohen in the Kodesh Kodashim. And when he offered this, the Ketores, the room filled up with smoke. The smoke was like a cloud. Again, the cloud of protection, the cloud of containing, the cloud of community, the cloud of bringing things together. And all, even though on Yom Kippur, there was a certain revelation, because the Ikar Inyan Becheser, because the main hiddenness, which is the month of Tishrei, which begins in the holiday, Hu B'Techilas HaChodesh, is at the beginning. The main hiddenness is on Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the month in Rosh Hashanah. Nevertheless, Hagili the Yom HaKippurim, the revelation of Yom Kippur, was, even though there was a revelation to the Kanim, it wasn't revealed to everybody. Its main revelation was Lamaila. In other words, it was a revelation of something going on in the spiritual worlds. That's why the Ketairos is why incense. You know, it says about Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, he will judge with his sense of smell. I mean, we have a bit of that today when you say, it just doesn't smell right. Something you're saying just doesn't smell right. Or I can, you get a whiff of something. And when you get a whiff of something, there's something very telling about it. So the sense of smell is an extremely refined smell. And it's way past logic. It has nothing to do with logic. It's sort of, you'd say today, I get it. I smell it. It has what you're saying has a good taste, a good smell. So, but that smell, though it was revealed in the Kodesh Kodashim, wasn't revealed to everybody. Masha'en came Basukis, on the other hand, in Sukkos, Nimshich Hagili Lamata, this smell of the Ketairos, this cloud of glory, and depending on what you use for your skach, most of us in the north here, and particularly in Crown Heights, use a lot of evergreens. And other people decorate the sukkah sometimes with certain incenses, but the incenses are very powerful. And the cloud of glory in the desert and the cloud of Ketairos in the Beis HaMikdash were very, very powerful and brought down very great revelations. V'ad asher skach HaSukkah, to such extent that the skach of the sukkah, habo me'inyan HaKetairos the Yom Kippurim, which comes and alludes to, or is alluded by, the clouds in the Kodesh Kodashim, when the Kohen Gadol went in and offered up the incense, niragam la'ene basar, everybody sees them, the skach. And one can say, this cholas gilizehu v'hayamim sheben Yom Kippurim l'sukkos. And in fact, you could say the beginning of the revelation of the clouds. You know, one thing I think we should be saying about clouds. Clouds, on the one hand, connotes obscurity, right? Concealment. But one needs to understand that the concealment is because that which is going to be revealed is so deep, so profound, so powerful, that were it not concealed, it would literally blow us away. We wouldn't be able to contain it. So it's like if any of you are familiar, and I think a number of you here, I see names, are with the Tzimtzum, the original Tzimtzum, when God contracted his allness and he created 10 separate utterances, which was the creation, that also was a concealment for the sake of a revelation. So concealment here is not hiding. Concealment here is a method of revelation. And what's happening in the Sukkah is a revelation harking back to the clouds of incense in Yom Kippur, which is part of the Holy of Holies, and harking back to the clouds of glory in the desert, which protected us. Very, very deep and very, very powerful energies from Hashem coming down and affecting us and binding with us and holding us together in a secure, peaceful, unified, and ultimately joyous way on Sukkot. She'oz hi hachana, because on Yom Kippur was a preparation to the mitzvahs of Sukkah. Ve'oz asiyas HaSukkah. So what we're saying here, we lost a bit of the thread here. When we go from Yom Kippur to Sukkot, there are days in between. But one of the minhagim, if not halachas, is that immediately upon the end of Yom Kippur, one should be busy with the Sukkah. The din is at least in thought, if you can't get out there and do something with it. So you see, the Sukkah is a direct outcome of Yom Kippur, because there's no separation. The only thing is you have to build it, and you have to get the materials. But all of that should be done in the days when the transitioning from Yom Kippur to Sukkot. Because in these days, of the makif, because indeed of the revelation, because in these days, the days between Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot is the beginning of the drawing down of the revelation that there will be that was on Yom Kippur, where in Yom Kippur the revelation mainly stayed above in the Kodesh Kodashim with Aaron HaKohen. But on Sukkot it comes down Gam Lamata. And again, for those of you who join late, what is this revelation? This is a revelation of an all-encompassing container, being contained in an all-encompassing embrace. The walls of the Sukkah are the embrace, and the skach itself, from which the Sukkah gets its name, and the holiday gets its name, is the all-encompassing, what we call the makif level, the all-encompassing level of God, which is being drawn down into our hearts and into ourselves through the drawing down of the Daled Minim, taking it to heart, and that gives us the experience, the revelation of the experience of God's all-encompassingness in our hearts. This is the meditation really of Sukkot. In Sukkot you should dwell. Dwelling means you're living in it, right? You're living in transcendence. You're living in those levels of godliness which had been concealed on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which, as I said in other Maimorim, are the 13 attributes of mercy. On Rosh Hashanah, God opens up those 13 channels, and Yom Kippur, those 13 channels are the place of forgiveness, right? Yom Kippur is, after all, the holiday of Slicha, the holiday of forgiveness, when we are relating to God on a level which is deeper than Tov and Ra, good and evil, right and left. And this revelation of God's depth, where right and left have no meaning, as it says in the Zohar, there's no left in that level. There's only God and good. That God and good comes down on Sukkot. And that's what we say, the Sukkah is the all-encompassing level. We're inside of it. We are being literally surrounded by God's all-encompassing compassion. And there were two avoiders that I said in the Beis HaMikdash. One was the Ketoros and one was the Korbanos. What's the difference? Korbanos kasiv lachme leishai. It says the Korbanos are called God's bread. Korbanos are brought into God's stomach, so to speak, which is the idea of panimi. Masha'en ken ketoiris, the ketoiris is a cloud above, is makif. And what's happening on Sukkot is the makif is being drawn into the panimi. We are, as it were, to use this expression, the ketoiris, we're able to consume, ingest, take to heart, with our Dalit meaning, the transcendent, all-encompassing, all-protecting love of God into our hearts on this holiday through being inside the sukkah and being yotzi, or fulfilling one of the mitzvahs that we're commanded to fulfill in relation to sukkahs. So the revelation that we're having on Sukkah once more is a revelation of the makif, the revelation of the transcendent, which normally these two things are two different worlds, as we said on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, it's concealed. Concealed. On Yom Kippur, it's revealed, but it's private. It's in the Kodesh Kodashim. And on Sukkot, it spills down to all of us and really to the whole world through the fact that on Sukkot there was offerings for all of the 70 nations. So that's the makif of the skach, the transcendent level of the skach. And since it's a reflection of that which is relevant to the Holy of Holies, which is a true inyan of transcendence, right? I mean, no one other than the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur was allowed in there on a level that's not normally touchable, certainly not normally edible, to use the word we use, that it was drawn down and taken to heart. So therefore, the makif, the transcendent level of the sukkah, which is drawn down from the cloud of the incense of Yom Kippur, it's not just a garment. We said earlier, garments come in different styles, hats, shirts, and shoes, we said. But this is a makif which has no hishalkus, no division. We're relating here to simple unity of God in a way that isn't usually apprehendable. It's certainly not apprehendable ever by pure reason. It's somewhat apprehendable by our ability to meditate out and get farther than pure reason and utilize the power of the bina liba, the understanding of the heart. But in no way is it as powerful as it is in these particular days when it's tangibilized in the fact that we're sitting physically inside of it. And this surpasses all other makifim. And now we'll answer a question that we asked me: what's the relationship particularly between sukkah and peace? Right? We had the expression that sukkah is related to peace. And here's the expression that we say: you should spread, God, you should spread upon us the sukkah of your peace. Since the sukkah is an all-encompassing kind of energy, which transcends any differentiation, any separateness. That's why it said earlier that all citizens of Israel should dwell in a sukkah, and all the ayin nations of the world had korbanos, because this is a time when there's no greater opportunity for expressing the humanity, the unity of humanity, than sukkahs, because that's what it encompasses. The small world, which is man. Man is called olam hakotan, and in doing so, it encompasses, like the clouds of glory, like the clouds of glory in the desert, the entire encampment, and ultimately the entire world. So this is brought down, this all-encompassing singularity, unity of Hashem, is nimshach mehamakif the sukkah, is drawn from the all-encompassing level of sukkah, which is the Indian of peace. Shalom is also means shlemus. Shlemus is peace. Shalom, something which is peaceful, is whole. When do you feel at peace? When there's a certain wholeness. When do you feel at peace? When there's a certain tranquility. You're sitting, encompassed and protected by the clouds of glory. That's when you feel peace. So, that's an interesting in itself kind of peace. But one thing he's about to say. So the peace that we're talking about here, Nasa Sholem Bein Nefesh Elokis LeNefesh Bahamis. It makes peace between the godly soul and the animal soul. What would that mean? Well, Sukkot is a holiday with a lot of physical manifestations. I mean, it says, for instance, in Gemara, in Simcha El Bayayin, there's no Simcha except for wine, also with meat. And the point is that and people who, in many, it's not so much the Minhag Chabad, but in other, particularly other Hasidic groups, it's a minhag to decorate the sukkah with the best of everything. I once spent the sukkahs in Spring Valley with one of the desert rabbis from Canada, and here all of his finest china, a beautiful silver bed, a canary in a cage, his Rebbetzin's amazing cholet. He lived there. That's the custom amongst most, to live in the sukkah, that you should make the sukkah your place of dwelling in these days, and that should be your permanent place. This temporary place should be your permanent place. So the sukkah then is full of satisfaction to the quote animal soul, but all through the mitzvahs of sukkahs. So it makes peace, it makes harmony. The godly soul and the animal soul are out for the same thing. The animal soul enjoys the physicality of the sukkah, and the godly soul enjoys, number one, enjoys that the two of them are together. Remember, the sukkah is a place where people get together. So the animal soul and the godly soul get together in the sukkah, and the animal soul enjoys the little opposition, that there's so less opposition on sukkah because of the fact that we have simcha in the flesh. The gam shol, so that's peace. It makes peace between people. It makes peace between communities. It brings peace in the world. It brings peace in all the worlds, the revelation of godliness in all the worlds, and especially in Olam Hazeh Hamata, down here below, where we are actually physically building and living in sukkahs. So this is the notion of peace, wholeness. The gam sholem b'chol ha'bechinos the nefesh elokis. It also makes peace amongst all the categories of the nefesh elokis. Nefesh elokis itself has 10 categories, and those 10 categories are echoed in the 10 powers in a person, from Chokhmah to Malchus, and the integration of those is called peace. When you integrate those things of yourself which may have been at war or may have been not active, and you activate and integrate, that's a sense of wholeness also. So all the levels of a person are elevated and activated in a unified manner. So again, everything about Sukkot is about unity. We expressed earlier in the class about each of the Daled Minim, how each of the Daled Minim express a different kind of unity, and the Sukkah expresses a transcendent, all-encompassing unity. To such an extent that through the Sukkah, that's a Sholem Gam Ba'olam. It creates peace in the world. Right? If each one of us, imagine a world in which each one of us are in harmony with ourselves. We're at peace with ourselves. Well, that's certainly a good opening to realize peace and harmony amongst our fellows. If two people who are at peace with themselves get together, there's no place for strife. And we've learned over and over again in our class in Chassidus that the ultimate way of integration is bittul, openness. In other words, you can have two opposites, chesed and gevura, kindness and the opposite, severity. They can be at war with each other, right? And they appear to be. One is kind and one is the opposite. But they don't need to be, because gevura itself, which is constraint and holding back and restraint, is sometimes the best way to be kind with someone. To give them what they need and not necessarily what they think they want, because what they think they want could be damaging to them. So if we can open our mind to the fact that opposites don't have to be opposites, they can integrate together, So bittul is the faculty of openness, the faculty of opening up oneself. And if we can do that with ourselves, open up ourselves to integrate all the different facets of ourselves so that we're not at war internally with each other, the same thing can accrue to when we meet other people, that we're not at war because we're at peace. And it goes broader and broader until it says, as the line I just read, it creates peace in the world. If human beings were at peace with themselves, there could be peace amongst communities, could be peace amongst nations, and God, even peace in the world. Ukiyadu is known, Sukka hi bedugmas tevis noyach, that the Sukkah is similar to the Ark of Noah. Well, think about it. The Ark of Noah was an all-encompassing vessel into which were taken and lived all various kinds of species, all various, as we are living, all various kinds of Jews in the Sukkah. So the Ark of Noah is also similar to the Sukkah. And what happened there? Shebo hoye inin hasholem. There was peace. Even though there were many kinds of animals, they lived all together. They didn't get angry and they didn't harm each other. And he says, the Rebbe says, this is like the kind of peace, something like the kind of peace which will be in the future, which it says about the future, let it be tonight. It says about the future, there will be no evil, there will be no evil at all, and there will be no destruction and no strife amongst people. I think we have to, since we're touching, I mentioned tonight, just in passing, but it's not really in passing. Each night has, while there are different ushpizim, 7 guests that come to the sukkah. Tonight is Aaron HaKohen, and it's no accident, since everything is Ashkacha Pratis, that we're learning tonight about the avodah of the Kohen Gadol in the Beis HaMikdash, was the Ketairos. And so the sweet smell of the Ketairos should be mamshik tonight and tomorrow as we meditate upon the Ketairos and the avodah of the Kohen Gadol, and how he drew down the hamshachas, the drawings down of godliness down here below, and we will ourselves with our sitting and dwelling in the sukkah. If you're following the page, we're going to conclude. Are we concluding? Yeah. We're going to conclude with this ois hey on this page. And I think I may have skipped something. Yeah, skip something on the previous page. It's important. The reason that in the future there will not be any strife and arguments amongst us, hu alidei hadas, is because of das. And we'll explain this in a minute. Because of the scripture that we're quoting about the future concludes, Kimole ha'aretz dea es havaya, that the earth is full of the knowledge of God. Now, one of the things we didn't mention tonight, but we did last week, in the mitzvah of Lulav and Esrog, the mitzvah of Lulav and Esrog, when you take them, you have to take them to the heart. So we learned last week the difference between what we call das, what's called das and translated as knowledge, and other intellectual parts of the brain, or parts of the brain, such as Chochmah and Bina, is that das connects to the heart. Das is the back side of the brain. Chochmah, Bina, das is the middle part of the brain, which connects to the top of the spinal cord, which gets into the emotional part of the person, the heart of it. And that's why when we take the dalaminim, we have to take it to the chest, to the heart. So das, though it's a mind quality, it's when mind meets heart. It's when the things that are going on in our brain are internalized and we develop a feelingful attachment to it. As one would say, he does it with a heart. His heart is in it. And that's why it says that in the future we will know. It doesn't say we'll understand, we will know. The das is, we will know Havaya. B'lachen, top of page Chof Tes. Therefore, Gam HaMakif the Sukkah. So also, the all-encompassing transcendence of the Sukkah, Shinyonihu Laman Yedu, is to know. Remember, what was concealed on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is being revealed. The transcendent level is coming down into this place where we are sitting. And that's the Inyan of Das. Who poil in Hasholem. And when a person has Das, again, Das is the integration and bringing to heart, and it's settled, then a person has peace. The effect of Das, the effect of real knowledge, of oneness with something, is peace. It's also wholeness. The Dugma Shel Shalom, which is comparable to the peace of the future. Okay, now we'll do the last piece. Let me just pause. There's a lot of folks out there. Thank you for onboarding. Any particular things you want to raise before we move on? Okay. Behine, so ois he. Hakavana v'hamshava samakif in the sukkah. The intention of this drawing down of this, all these all-encompassing levels, which, as I said earlier, not in the Maimer but in other Maimorim, is the revelation of the Yud Gimel Midas Arachamim that need to come down with a shade, because if they come down openly, if there were no skach, and you just had an opening at the top, of course you don't fulfill the mitzvah. Why? Because in order for this transcendent, all-encompassing level of God, all-embracing level of God to come down, it has to come down in a way that we can take it. And we are poor little creatures down here below. We can't take it directly, so it has to come down the shade. The expression in Pasuk is Tzel Yomim, the shade of the day. So the whole purpose of this drawing down of this Malkif, of these transcendent levels in the Sukkah, Sheyimshechu v'yiplu gam b'penimius, is that the transcendent should be brought into the internalized. V'zehu inyan netilas daled minim. And this is, as I've said before, but he's saying it now in the Maimer, this is the taking of the four species. Haba behemshach lebesukis teshvu, which comes afterwards in terms of the order of things. When you think of the order of things, the mitzvah yeshiva besukkah, the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah, umischolas shivas yemei hasukkahs, is at the beginning, right? You build the sukkah, and in fact, the first night you sit in it, but you haven't done the daled minim yet. So the very first thing, the start of it, the ikar, the root of it, is about the sukkah, and only after this in the morning, when the first light occurs, depending on which halachas, which poskim you're listening to, Meschilas, Mitzvahs, and Tilas, Daled Minim. That's when the four species take place. So the sukkah is not only the name of the holiday, and not only the predominant experience of union and peace and the joy, simcha that comes through that, it's also the first thing that occurs, and the Daled Minim are later. So first the transcendent alone, and then the Daled Minim. The Hini, the Natilas Daled Minim, the whole point of taking the four species, is to draw down the all-encompassing energies of the sukkah into Panemius. And the next bracket, till the end. Shaham Shocha, that is drawing down, Tia Gambe Inyani Ha'olam. We want the transcendent, God's all-encompassing presence, in which there is no machloikus, no contrariness, no argument, no left and right, etc. That perspective should be drawn into the world. The perspective of the allness, the wholeness of God into the world. So that's the reason we bring these down. How do we bring these down? Adla inyani olam hazeh, until they reach the things of this world, hatachton, this lower world, shehein hatachton lamatim amenu, which this world has no world lower than it. V'lachem gam pa'ulas hashalom. Therefore, the making this happen, the effect of bringing this into the world, Shayis al jidei hamshochas das, which comes through the drawing down of das, as I said, das, integration. Higam lamata b'olam hazeh tachton. It comes down into this world, and that's the symbolism, not the simple, I would call it, it's really not symbolism, it's the instrumentation. The instrumentation by which the transcendent is drawn into the immanent is the dalat aminim, which we bring to heart. And this creates a state, and let's see if we can now and certainly tomorrow morning when we're in the sukkah, or whenever you'll have an opportunity to bench lulav and esrog, if you can have a contemplative moment to think about this, that what is happening here is kedugmas la'asad lavai, is something like the experience that everyone in the world will have in the future, soon to come. When people will not be angry with each other and not be destroying each other. Why? This planet Earth, this lowest of the low, will be full of the Dea Esavaya, of the knowledge of God. And the relationship of this experience of the fullness of, that the earth should be full of the knowledge of God, to that there should not be evil and destruction, is, the relationship it is, he said just now a mouthful. The whole idea of quarreling and arguing with the things that keep us apart is because of katnus hadas, small-mindedness. Small-mindedness. Eliza, I can't hear you. You're muted. Okay, but yeah. Small-mindedness, right. Katnus hadas. And when we say katnus hadas, let's be more specific than small-mindedness. Smallness in the ability to take our mind, what we can understand with our mind, and bring it to heart. In other words, the mind is capable of, like a judge, is capable of seeing opposites and finding a balance between the two. And if we could take that to heart and live with it, so that's called greatness of mind, godless hadas. And so, but the expression again, the whole that the world is in a state of quarrel and separateness is mikad of katnus hadas, smallness of das. V'yidua hamashal al zeh, and it's known the mashal on this. What's the mashal? Sha'akotin, a small kid, a child, she'en le das, who doesn't have a mature das, kasha en mamoyle notzoyne, when his will is not fulfilled, miyad humitz nisrages, he's angry. You may know some adults like this. I don't know. Ukamavora b'Sefer Tanya, as is written in Sefer Tanya Kedisha, the Holy Tanya, Sha'akotin miskas, a child gets angry from small things. Midovorim ketanya. Masha'enken hagadol, on the other hand, a gadol, an adult. But we're talking not here chronologically. We're talking about development of mind, development of heart. If a person is full-minded, broad-minded, open-minded, bittul, puts himself aside enough to see contrary and what appear to be opposite positions, and a person is greatness of heart, is a gadol, right? A gadol yesh le das. Someone who's great like that has das, has the ability to see and integrate opposing positions and take it to heart. Yochel hu lispil gam hifuchay. He can tolerate even something which is opposite him. And this gets to the question we asked at the beginning, what the sukkah has to do with peace. There's our word das, since the inyan of sukkah is for the sake of knowing. Therefore, through das, again, the faculty of mind which is integrated in the heart, which is drawn through the sukkah, nasa hashalom, this makes peace, which is sukkah shlemecha, which is your peace, your sukkahs of peace. And with this, I'll just end with, one of the things we say in benching in this time, Harakaman huyokim lanu es sukas David hanefeles. And it's brought that the merciful one, and again, to remember, this time all relates to the revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy. Those which were bechesed l'yem chaginu, they were hidden on Rosh Hashanah, became somewhat revealed through the slicha, the forgiveness on Yom Kippur, and become completely revealed through the joy that we have on Sukkot. So this Sukkah, when we speak about those things which are the opposite of everything which Isha just talked about, the opposite of unity, harmony, compassion, peace, that's called the fallen Sukkah. And in Chassidus, that's called taking the Shekhinah and drawing it and schlepping it into exile. Galus HaShekhinah. So we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity for all the remaining days of Sukkot. It's a huge opportunity through our own contemplative and joyous experience in the Sukkot to bring godliness, godly rays of peace and harmony into the world and affect the quality of not only the upper worlds and not only and hopefully our personal worlds, but the world at large. So with that, unless someone would like to speak up and ask any question, I will say Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach. Have a great, great Sukkot till we meet again on the other side. Good Ketut. Okay. Amen.